Number 10. In the summer of 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus had just bought their new 6-bedroom, $1.3 million home in Westfield, New Jersey, and began to do some renovations prior to them moving in. While sorting through some mail, they found a small white envelope addressed to the new owner, so they opened it up to begin reading. The letter started off with warm greetings but quickly turned strange. The couple knew the letter was directed to them because it had mentioned the vehicle they drove, the couple's children, as well as the writer's distaste for the renovations that were being done. If this letter wasn't creepy enough, it was signed off as The Watcher. I cannot explain to you guys how quickly I would have had that house back up for sale if I received this letter. Over the next few weeks, the family continued to receive more letters from the Watcher, and the letters began to include more personal information. The couple was unsure of where to go or if they should continue their move into this new house, which I would absolutely say no. The people began to speculate who the Watcher could be, but there was no concrete evidence. Number 9. Cody James and Gary Harker were longtime friends who were working together on Christmas Day in 1979 in Moline, Illinois. They left Cody's shop to head out in the truck to deliver an air compressor to Rock Island, Illinois, and then head to pick up a $500 payment for it in Davenport, Iowa, which they never made it to. The black truck they were driving was found almost 2 months after they had gone missing, and subsequently was put up for auction after not being claimed for 40 days. The bodies of Cody and Gary were found in the truck bed by the men who ended up purchasing it. 25 years after their deaths, the case was still unsolved. A friend of Cody and Gary brought police a roll of film that had been entrusted to him by the men. Cody and Gary gave their friend the film all those years earlier, and they said, "If anything happens to us, develop this film." It is crazy to think that this friend waited 25 years to spill this tea, and that perhaps the men knew what was about to happen to them. Unfortunately, the film didn't give police any solid leads, although the case continues to be investigated. Number 8. On August 6, 1930, New York Supreme Court Judge Joseph Force Crater left a Manhattan restaurant and was never seen again. Joseph had been spending the summer with his wife, Stella Mance Wheeler, in a vacation home they owned in Maine. Joseph had to leave Maine to travel back to New York on August 3rd, but told Stella he would only be a few days. On August 6th, the day of his disappearance, Joseph purchased a ticket for a Broadway performance and headed out for a pre-show dinner where he met his friend, attorney William Klein, along with one of Joseph's many girlfriends, showgirl Sally Lou Ritz. Witnesses stated that Joseph left the restaurant at approximately 9:15 p.m., which was after the start of the show he had planned to attend. In January of 1931, almost 6 months after his disappearance, Stella moved back into their apartment where she reported she found 4 envelopes. One of the envelopes was in Joseph's handwriting and was a list of everyone who owed him money. It was signed, "Love Joe, this is all confidential," and included a messy note that either says, "I am weary" or "I'm very sorry," which either way is a pretty menacing last message for a grieving wife to receive. In 2005, authorities received a potential break in the case when a 91-year-old woman named Stella Ferrucci Good had passed away, leaving a note sealed in an envelope that read, "Do not open until my death." Inside the letter, she implicated 3 men in Joseph's disappearance, but the claims of this letter have never been proven. Number 7. On June 3, 2011, in Bloomington, Indiana, 20-year-old university student Lauren Spirer disappeared after a night out with friends. Lauren was from Greenburgh, New York, but had been attending Indiana University. A few hours after being seen leaving her apartment, her boyfriend texted her only to receive a response several hours later from an employee of a bar who had found her phone. Not much is known about Lauren's disappearance, but it said she left her apartment around 12:30 a.m., stopped at the bar where her phone was found, and was last seen around 4:30 a.m. leaving a friend's off-campus apartment. Over the course of the years, Lauren's family has tried following every lead they had to find out what happened to Lauren, but have yet to find the answers that they deserve. Number 6. This is a story that really gives me the creeps. On April 20th, 1989, Patricia Bernadette Meehan was in a car accident on Highway 200 near Circle, Montana. Witnesses saw her driving her car on the wrong side of the road, which led to her crashing into an off-duty police dispatcher, Carol Heights. Carol was luckily uninjured in the crash and got out of her vehicle right away. Upon exiting her vehicle, Carol saw Patricia also exit her vehicle, walk up to her, and just stare at her without saying a word. Patricia then walked away, climbing over a fence, and stood staring at the accident before walking away and disappearing, which is definitely enough to give me goosebumps. A search began immediately but turned up little results. There have been thousands of reported sightings of Patricia that have potentially given police leads to her whereabouts, but she still has never been found. Number 5. If you've been bored during quarantine, I know that you've turned on Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix and heard the unbelievable story of Lester Eubanks. Lester was a murderer who was convicted and sentenced to prison in 1966 for the killing of a 14-year-old girl named Mary Ellen Diener in Mansfield, Ohio. In December 1973, Lester was part of an honor assignment that gave him an opportunity to be at the mall to do some Christmas shopping. While at the mall, he ended up escaping custody and has been on the run ever since. Through investigations into his family and friends, police were led to a center for troubled youth where he was said to have been working, but Lester was nowhere to be found. The most recent development in this case came recently in 2019 when Lester's biological son agreed to give a DNA sample which could be used to link Lester to recent crimes and maybe give an idea on where he could be hiding. But FBI policy says that you cannot search using another family member's DNA. It's crazy that somebody could be on the run for that long without anybody recognizing or finding them, and it makes me really wonder if anyone in his new life knows about his dark past. Number 4. William Russell Henry was a 57-year-old self-employed landscaper in Tulare, California. On November 5th, 2009, he was last seen at a Home Depot before his truck and trailer were found abandoned and set on fire 4 days later. Upon investigation, the police believe that William was assaulted at his house before going missing, but have not released the evidence that has led them to believe that. William was someone who was well liked by those around him and well known as he had done landscaping for a lot of people around town. Police haven't been able to identify who he was seen with at the Home Depot before disappearing. I wonder if the person he was with is responsible for his disappearance and that's why they haven't come forward with any information. Either way, it's pretty unsettling. Number 3. On November 3rd, 2015, in Spokane, Washington, Deanna Marie Hastings left a note saying she was running a quick errand but never returned home. Her boyfriend found her car shortly after her disappearance with her phone and purse still inside. Police tracked activity on her credit cards after she had gone missing, which led them to Randy Riley. Randy had stolen Deanna's credit cards and began using them but denied any involvement in her disappearance. He said he'd met her previously and that she was very drunk and that they had spent a few hours together. A day after their meeting, he said he found her coat on the side of the road with her wallet still inside, which is when he decided to take her cards. Randy was charged with identity theft and possession of stolen property, but is not a suspect in her disappearance. Number 2. This story brings us back to California, but this time to Vallejo. On August 8th, 1994, John Wagner Jr. witnessed his drug supplier, Bradley Hoover, commit a murder. John was obviously traumatized by what he had witnessed, but fully cooperated and gave testimony to police. On November 2nd, 1994, which was John's 26th birthday, his mother called him to wish him a happy birthday. His mother explains that he was still really frightened about what he had witnessed and was having a hard time coping, which I feel like is a pretty reasonable reaction to what he had gone through. Unfortunately, this phone call with his mother was the last time anyone has heard from him. There's not a lot of evidence in his disappearance, and it's unclear whether it was linked to his testimony about the murder he witnessed, as Bradley Hoover didn't end up getting convicted until 2011, but police are still investigating every avenue possible. Number 1. This next one I'm sure you guys have heard about before. On November 24th, 1971, a man who said his name was Dan Cooper boarded a flight from Portland to Seattle. Once the plane was in the air, Cooper handed a note to a flight attendant who assumed the note was Cooper just shooting his shot and giving her his phone number, and she dropped it into her purse without even opening it. Cooper then leaned over and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb," which is the worst thing for a flight attendant to hear. After showing her the bomb, he began to list his demands: $200,000, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane for when they arrived. Cooper's been described as being incredibly calm and polite, even though it seems pretty rude to hijack an airplane. At 5:39 p.m., the aircraft landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. After receiving the items he had requested, Cooper ordered all the passengers and some of the flight attendants to leave the plane. The plane then took off again, and when it landed in Reno, Nevada, Cooper wasn't on it. The search for Cooper was one of the most extensive in US history. To this day, there are a lot of theories about who this man was and what happened to them, but none of them have been proven yet. I wonder if we'll ever get the answers we're looking for.
Starting us off at number 10 is death by water. One of the fundamentals of human life is that we need water to survive. Not only that, we're made up of approximately 60% water. We sweat water, we clean ourselves with water, and essentially rely on it to get through the day. So what happens when someone is allergic to water? Well, their life becomes about 100 times more complicated. One of the biggest mysteries in the medical field is an extremely rare condition called aquatogenic urticaria, where the skin breaks out into extremely painful hives or rash anytime it's exposed to water. As of a 2013 medical review, only 37 cases have been reported since 1964, most of which were female, as well as most reporting the condition only arose during or right after puberty began. What's insane about this condition is that not only are the afflicted often allergic to rainwater, snow, fresh water, and seawater, but many are allergic to their own sweat and tears, and even worse is that some people get rashes or welts on their lips and mouth area from just trying to drink enough water to stay alive. While there are a few theories out there about what could cause this peculiar nightmare condition, the underlying cause has never been confirmed and continues to perplex the medical community to no end. Coming in at number 9, stone tears. When Chandy was 15, she woke one morning feeling like there was something stuck in her eye. To her surprise, when she went to go and look in the mirror, there was a small stone in her eye, appearing to be coming from her tear duct. Ever since that day in July of 2021, Chadney and her family say that the young girl has cried stones out of her eyes several times a day, every day, and no one has any clue why, or frankly how, this could be happening. Allegedly, in just the 2 months since the ordeal began, Chadney collected nearly 70 stones that had fallen out of her eyes. The family lives in a small rural village in India, and they don't have much money to send her to specialists, but have posted videos online to try and get help for their daughter. According to the doctors that weigh in, there is no known existing condition that could be associated with this, so it's definitely disturbing, especially considering that from what anyone can tell, nothing seems to be out of the ordinary in her actual eyes. Now, truth be told, there are some doctors out there who think it could be a hoax, but nothing has been confirmed, and honestly, no one really knows what is going on. Next up at number 8, the Iceman. You know how there are people out there who like to do a morning cold plunge? Well, one man, Wim Hof, nicknamed the Iceman, seems to have taken that to a whole new level. Born in the Netherlands in 1959, Hof is, as it seems, immune to freezing temperatures. At the age of 17, Hof said he had a sudden impulse to strip down and jump into a half-frozen canal, and it's not that he felt nothing, but he was able to withstand it for far longer than should have made any sense. This turned him into developing what he calls the Wim Hof method, which he says combines frequent exposure to cold paired with special breathing techniques along with yoga and meditation. In fact, Hof set the Guinness World Record for prolonged full body contact with ice and for swimming under ice in 2000. Then in 2012, curious about if it really was all some breathing technique or if he was some kind of medical marvel, researchers in the Netherlands examined samples of Hof's blood and determined that he was somehow able to manipulate his immune system at will, essentially stopping his body from going into a stress response due to the temperature. Now, sure, does his deep breathing help regulate the body? Of course, but Hof would have you believe it's all in the technique. However, there have been several tragic deaths from people attempting his method and subsequently freezing themselves to death, so maybe there is a little more to the story. Coming in at number 7, a human chimera. Due to the nature of how lives are brought into this world, if there's one thing that is never up for debate, it's generally the biological mother of a person. However, one woman named Karen Keegan found herself in the most bizarre and baffling situation. In 2002, Karen was in need of a second kidney transplant after her first one failed, so she underwent genetic testing with her family to see if any of them would be a match and able to donate her. So imagine Karen and her doctor's surprise when the test suggested that genetically, while all her children were siblings, she was not the biological mother of 2 of the 3 children she brought into the world. Her doctor assumed this had to be a mistake, and so they tested once more, but strangely, the results were the same. As it turns out, Karen was a chimera, which is a person composed of 2 genetically distinct cellular lines. Essentially, it turns out that the DNA in her blood was different from the DNA in her ovaries, a phenomenon that her doctor hypothesized came from 2 eggs that were fertilized very early on and fused together when Karen was a fetus in her own mother. Okay, so maybe this one isn't a totally unsolved medical mystery, but you have to admit it's pretty wild. Next up at number 6, foreign accent syndrome. Imagine waking up one morning and suddenly talking in a completely different accent than you have your entire life. While some people might think that you're doing a bit, believe it or not, there is an actual mystery called foreign accent syndrome, or FAS, where the very thing can happen. Most famously was the case in 1941 when a Norwegian woman suffered a traumatic brain injury during an air raid and suddenly and uncontrollably began speaking with a strong German accent. But others include an American woman who suddenly spoke in a mixture of Australian, Irish, and British after a car accident, as well as an Australian woman who suddenly spoke with a French accent after going to sleep with a headache. For a while, it was regarded as a psychological disorder, however, it is now associated as more of a neurological one, usually onset by head trauma or a stroke. But the part that scientists have not been able to wrap their brains around is how on earth people can seemingly speak in an accent they have never been exposed to. When learning to speak, your natural accent is a result of sound patterns you unconsciously learn, otherwise known as the phonetic system. When you are young, accents can shift as you become exposed to new speech patterns, but by the time you reach your teen years, your phonetic system is pretty much locked in. But FAS somehow affects the entire patterning of your phonetic system and continues to perplex doctors all over the world. Next up at number 5, no appetite. Sometimes when you're feeling under the weather or on a certain medication, it's not uncommon to find that your appetite has gone down. However, anyone who has ever met a teenager can attest that of all the people, they are usually the last to lose their appetite. But back in 2013, a 12-year-old named Landon Jones from Iowa baffled doctors after he suddenly woke up one morning feeling faint and with a horrible cough. His parents wasted no time immediately rushing him to the hospital, where it was discovered he had an infection in his left lung, and while the infection was promptly treated, the worst of it was yet to come. For whatever reason, ever since that day, Landon has never had any kind of appetite or thirst. The boy rapidly started losing weight, going from 104 pounds to just 68 right before his parents' eyes, all seemingly due to the fact that he never felt a hunger or thirst cue. As he continued losing weight, his parents were growing more and more worried about their son's strange condition. But no matter what doctor they took him to, they could never get an answer as to what was happening to him. Landon was given countless brain scans, psych evals, medical evals, and tested to make sure he didn't have an eating disorder, but nothing was providing them with an answer. Some doctors have wondered if he suffers from a brain dysfunction in the hypothalamus, the part that controls hunger and thirst, but his case remains unsolved. Next up at number 4, Syndrome X. When Brooke Greenberg was born in 1993, she weighed a mere 4 pounds and had a hip dislocation. Luckily, the hip issue was fixed through a surgery, and although 4 pounds is generally revered as small for a newborn, she was premature and nothing else seemed off, so from what doctors could see, she appeared to be perfectly healthy. However, things started becoming mysterious around the time she was 4 or 5 years old, as her parents and doctors noticed that Brooke appeared to have stopped growing. As the years went by, Brooke remained virtually unaided, a phenomenon that confused every single medical professional that her family seeked out. By the age of 20, she still looked the same as she had when she was 4 years old, measuring less than 3 feet tall and weighing only about 16 pounds. And it wasn't only her appearance that had stopped progressing. Brooke communicated as an infant would, giggling when happy, crying when sad, and continued to wear diapers. Interestingly, the only thing that continued to grow as normal were Brooke's hair and nails. The family took her to endless specialists over the years looking for answers to their daughter's condition, but each one was just as perplexed as the next. Some simply said not to worry and that she would catch up, while others prescribed growth hormones, but nothing ever seemed to help their daughter grow. Doctors were completely stumped by this poor girl's condition, calling it Syndrome X, and ever since her death at the age of 20 in 2013, specialists have yet to come up with an explanation. Coming in at number 3, eyes shut. When Natalie Adler was 17, she awoke one morning to find that her eyelids were mysteriously swollen. While this was definitely alarming to Natalie, she didn't initially think much of it. Maybe it was allergies or something along those lines. However, next thing she knew, the condition was only getting worse. Her eyes started to become so swollen that she eventually wasn't able to open them up at all. Even stranger was that it began developing into an inexplicable cycle where they would spasm shut for 3 days, and then they would open for 3 days, and it did that for 13 years. By the time she was 30, doctors were still at a loss for what was causing her rare condition. A condition that is so rare, in fact, that it doesn't even have a name. And even after hundreds of tests, they are no closer to understanding her condition. Over the years, Natalie has undergone several surgeries, none of which have proved successful, however said that she does get Botox injections to help keep her eyes partially open, although she continues to suffer from random bouts of blindness each month. Although doctors have yet to come any closer on how to cure her condition, she continues to see eye specialists, hoping that one day her medical mystery will be solved. Coming in at number 2, twins. There are lots of different kinds of perplexing conditions that have popped up in the medical world over the years, but one of the wildest has to be the story of Sanju Bhagat. Most of his life, Sanju had been incredibly self-conscious about his large stomach, which he described as once being so big he appeared to be 9 months pregnant. What's even more shocking is that for whatever reason, he never received any kind of medical attention for his protruding belly. That was until one day in 1999 when Sanju began to experience shortness of breath and was rushed to the hospital. When he got there, the doctors assumed Sanju had a large tumor in his abdomen and rushed him into the operating room to remove it. However, instead of an enormous tumor they expected, they could not believe their eyes when they opened him up and found the remains of a half-formed twin that had been living inside of him the last 36 years. The condition, called fetus in fetu, is incredibly rare, having only been documented 90 times in medical literature throughout history. As it turns out, when Sanju had been in the womb, his twin had become trapped inside and essentially became a parasite. Most that suffer this condition do not live long, often not even surviving inside their own mother, so doctors were completely flabbergasted and unable to explain how this man had lived 36 years with the twin inside of him. And last up today in our number 1 spot, no pain. While most of the time we try to avoid it since you know it hurts and it isn't fun, knowing that you are in pain is actually really important because it helps you keep from getting more hurt. Like when you burn your arm on the 400-degree oven rack and it hurts like hell, so you immediately move your arm away. Or maybe you break your ankle and it obviously hurts, so you stop walking, thus hopefully stopping you from making it even worse. So with that in mind, imagine a life where nothing was telling you you were in pain. Well, that's exactly what Gabby Gingras has had to deal with her whole life. Now 23, Gabby has never felt a semblance of pain her whole life. As a little one, her parents said she would chew her hands until they looked like raw meat, but would never cry, and it was then that they knew something was not right. Then a few years later, Gabby scratched herself blind in one eye and had to wear goggles to sleep until she was old enough to understand her condition. As a kid, she routinely, unwittingly injured herself, once knocking out all of her teeth, another time getting second-degree burns from standing too close to a radiator, and even broke her own jaw but had no idea for several weeks. Even seemingly small things like weather conditions don't faze her. She has to be reminded to wear a coat in the winter so she doesn't get frostbite, or stand in the shade in the summer, as she's completely unaware of how to gauge temperature. Her condition is called hereditary sensory autonomic neuropathy, or HSAN, and while there is no cure, and the cause of the condition remains a big question mark to medical professionals, with proper support and learning from an intellectual perspective what can be dangerous, most people can thankfully live a totally normal life.
Starting us off at number 10 is the Devil's Bible, also known as the Codex Gigas. Back in the 13th century, there was a monk who was sentenced to be walled up alive because he broke his sacred vows. Obviously, this guy wasn't a fan of dying, so what did he do? He promised the monastery that if they let him live, he would write a book that would contain all human knowledge in a day. Yikes, that might be worse than death. In order to fulfill his promise, he sold his soul to the devil himself. Supposedly, this Devil's Bible contained a complete Latin translation of the Bible and multiple other texts, such as medical formulas and even instructions for performing exorcisms. This book was created using more than 160 animal skins and apparently takes 2 people just to lift it. Although, mysteriously, this book became a bit lighter because 12 pages are actually missing. Rumor has it, these pages contain satanic rituals to summon the devil himself. Of course, there is no way in knowing unless we read it for ourselves, so if any of you hardcore readers out there get a chance to take a peek, let me know in the comments. Coming in at number 9 is the Nazca Lines. Most of us have heard of crop circles before, but what about the Nazca Lines? The Nazca Lines, just like crop circles, are actually named geoglyphs. Now, what is a geoglyph? A geoglyph is a large design produced on the ground and usually formed by clastic rocks, stones, stone fragments, and gravel or earth. The Nazca Lines were first discovered in the 1930s when pilots were flying over the Nazca Desert in southern Peru and came across these massive drawings. The ancient Nazca civilization made up these drawings consisting of animals, humans, and plants around 2,000 years ago. There are said to be over 100 of these drawings spanning a total of 50 square kilometers. And while many can identify who and what created these massive drawings, no one alive actually knows the reason behind them. Scholars theorize that these were massive signs to give incoming sailors directions, or that they were a way to communicate with those above us. Dun dun dun! Here at number 8 we have the Roman dodecahedrons. All over the world for hundreds of years, random stone and bronze objects have been popping up in fields and sometimes even in people's yards. These objects are called the Roman dodecahedrons. These objects have 12 sides with a small circle on each and pegs sticking out of every single corner. Experts have dated these objects all the way back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, but once again, they have no idea of their purpose. Many believe these objects resemble an ancient nautical devices, or were used to sow winter grains or even calibrate water pipes for Roman architects. In the end, all of these are just theories and cannot be told for sure. So maybe go and invest in a metal detector and see what you can find. At number 7, we have the King List. Dating all the way back to the 3rd millennium BCE, this giant slab known as the King List lists all of the Sumerian kings with their respective dynasties, locations, and the times they were in power. This may not seem like much of a mystery to you, but the mystery isn't the list of the Sumerian kings on the slab, but what is actually included in the list of kings. There are mythological events inscribed on the slab, as well as the events of the Great Flood and the tales of Gilgamesh, meaning that the stories from the Old Testament could indeed be true and that the kings included on the list were actually gods or demigods. Hopefully all that power didn't go to their heads. At number 6, we have the Antikythera mechanism. Back in 1900, a group of sponge divers discovered a shipwreck in the Mediterranean dating all the way back to 70 to 60 BCE. These divers salvaged 3 pieces of bronze making up what is now known as the Antikythera mechanism. This shoebox-sized artifact stunned scholars for over a century due to the fact that the object's gears and internal mechanisms were far beyond any of the known Greek tech of the time. Some even believe that this object is proof of ancient aliens' visitations to Earth. Although in the late 20th century, X-rays showed that the object is designed to track astronomical movements and was confirmed later by CT scans that revealed inscriptions for what was basically an ancient computer. While the object's use has now been confirmed, what is still puzzling is the advanced construction and precision of this tool that is believed to be way more advanced than what was available at the time. I don't know. If you ask me, I say aliens. At number 5, we have the stone spheres of Costa Rica. Ever since the 1940s, scientists have been digging up these ancient mysterious spheres in the Dicus Delta of Costa Rica. Originally discovered by agricultural forays by the United Fruit Company, small stone spheres ranging from a few centimeters wide to 2 meters in diameter and weighing over 16 tons have been popping up everywhere in the Dicus Delta. Every single one of these spheres is man-made and made up of an igneous stone known as granodiorite. Many of these stone spheres have been moved to high-profile locations throughout Costa Rica, and some are even now privately owned. Everyone seems to love them for their decoration, but the coolest thing about them is that absolutely no one knows why, how, or who made these strange objects. Seems to be a common theme, huh? At number 4, we have the bog bodies of Northern Europe. Ever since the 18th century, hundreds and hundreds of well-preserved human bodies have been discovered in the peat bogs of Northern Europe. Some of these bodies have been dated all the way back to 8000 BCE. Some of you may be familiar with the famous Toland man, who was discovered back in 1950 by 2 Danish farmers in a small town in Denmark. The Toland man is believed to be from the pre-Roman Iron Age of the 3rd century BCE. His body was so well preserved that scientists were able to look at the contents of his stomach to determine where he lived. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dewey, this sounds amazingly gross and cool, but where's the mystery, my dude? Well, I'm glad you asked. All of the bodies that have been found have no explanation as to why they were placed in the bogs, nor why this way of disposal would be utilized. There are only speculations that these people were either sacrifices or social outcasts who were fated to meet their doom. Wow. And I thought high school kids were mean. Coming in at number 3 is the underwater ruins of Japan. Just under the surface off the coast of Yonaguni-jima is Japan's very own Atlantis. First discovered back in 1995, divers and researchers believed the findings to be nothing more than just a series of weird rock formations that included straight lines and right angles. Later, there were researchers that discovered a large stone gateway, carved stairways, and streets to huge vaulting towers. Many believe the underwater mystery to be the fallen city of the Jomon people. Experts believe that the city didn't fall into the sea like other fabled underwater cities, but actually slowly submerged over thousands of years. It is believed that this site could hold secrets and answers to all of the other theorized underwater cities around the world, such as Atlantis. Now, we could continue to theorize, or we could just believe that Aquaman starring Jason Momoa is actually a documentary and he currently does live in the ocean. I could see it. At number 2, we have the Piri Reis map. In 1929, this old map was found in the Sultan's palace in Istanbul, Turkey. A legendary commander of the Ottoman fleet by the name of Piri Reis, who lived from 1465 to 1553, is the author of the map. Reis's map is extremely precise. So precise that it actually includes the continent of Antarctica. But wait, hold the phone. Antarctica wasn't discovered until 1773 by British Captain James Cook. But yet, here is Piri Reis's map showing Antarctica back in 1513. Was Antarctica actually just discovered much earlier than originally thought? Or did James Cook just take credit for someone else's hard work? We might never know. Finally, coming in at number 1 is the infamous Big Daddy Stonehenge. In case you've been living under a prehistoric rock for the last few thousand years, you've probably heard of Stonehenge. Stonehenge is a giant prehistoric monument that is located in England and dates back to 3000 BC. The monument consists of a ring of standing stones all weighing around 25 ton, originally from a quarry located 25 kilometers or 15.53 miles away from the current monument. Not one person knows how these ancient people could have moved these massive stones without the use of a wheel or pulley, or why they were even formed in the first place. Is it an ancient observatory? Healing place? Did ancient aliens create it as a landing pad? We may never actually know.
Coming in at number 10, we have what was before the Big Bang. The common consensus is that there was a massive event at the beginning of time that brought all of the universe into existence, and a bunch of stuff happened and then humans showed up. I hope you realize that I'm fast tracking this whole story a little bit. But some of the brightest minds on the planet have been able to use their collective intelligence to pull back the data to the point where the universe erupted from a condensed little sliver of explosion and fired out billions of galaxies across the ever-expanding universe, but everything that we understand about physics doesn't give us any information about what was before. Many scientists have uttered the words, "It doesn't make sense anymore." Man, that must be frustrating to just not be able to crack the code. My speculation is, and I come at this with zero knowledge of how the universe works, but that before the universe started, there was Samuel Jackson. Because that guy's everywhere. He's done like 200 movies. Coming in at number 9, we have dark matter. If you get into the world of science fiction, then you would have for sure heard of some character using dark matter for something, and it's usually very dangerous for whatever reason. And why is that? Well, here's the thing, scientists still don't know what dark matter is. They have never been able to bottle the stuff and look at it closely, but the universe shows a lot of signs that it does exist. The speculation as to what dark matter is basically a web of particles so plentiful that it holds the universe together. To give you perspective, what we can see in the universe, the stars, the planets, the moons, all of that only takes up about 5% of the endless void. Now, dark matter is thought to take up 25% of the space. There's speculation that dark matter has a gravitational pull, and that's why people think it props up the universe. Other people think that dark matter is an undiscovered property of gravity. Really, we have no idea what's going on, so when you read a science fiction book and they talk about dark matter, remember that the writer has no idea either. At number 8, we have why do we sleep? Well, because Stone Cold said so. That's a super old reference that probably no one will know, but this has been a question that has baffled scientists for an extremely long time. We know the benefits of sleep. When you sleep, your body repairs itself. Sleep is good for your cognitive function. Sleep helps your brain get in information. I could go on for 20 videos about all the scientific evidence about how important sleep is for your health. In fact, getting better sleep is the easiest and cheapest way to get healthier, but the question still stands. Why? There are other organisms on the planet that never need to sleep, like bullfrogs, who won't fall asleep but they go into a rest state. There's a lot of speculation. Some people think that because our bodies are so much more complex, but they still come from the same genetic soup as a lot of the other things on this planet, our cells can't run something this powerful without taking a break. Other people think that this was some sort of defense mechanism created to wait out predators, but in the end we still don't have the answers. Coming in at number 7, we have the multiverse theory. Now, I want to start off by saying that this theory is still very unproven. It is all speculation. There are some microwave signals that come from the universe, and some scientists think this is evidence of other universes, but it's not like gravity, where we know it's real, we just don't know why. The multiverse theory is that, very much like the infinite expanding universe, there's also an infinite number of other universes that have all different variations of reality, which is pretty much the backbone of the show Rick and Morty. This could mean that there is a universe where you are the hot chick, so feel good about yourself. Now, even if this theory was true, it wouldn't be easy to go visit these places. Beyond the fact that we would have to build something to open a gate to these worlds, the laws of physics that bind these other universes together could be so different from our own that going to them would literally tear your atoms apart. At number 6, we have why does time flow forward? Well, what is perceived as forward, you feel me? I mean, when I first was reading about this, I thought, well, because it does. It can only move one way. But why is the ultimate question? I think that's why I never became a scientist, because I never think to ask these questions. Newton wrote, all motion may be accelerated or slowed, but the flowing of absolute time is not liable to any change. And it's even in question, how could you measure the flow of time? I mean, time could stop moving right now and then start moving the very next second, and we would never be able to tell the difference because our lives continue no matter what. So maybe this is a question that doesn't need to be asked, but I'm glad that we're asking it because one day I would like to go back in time so I can go to Woodstock. Coming in at number 5, we have how does gravity work? I mean, if you ask a flat earther, they'll tell you that gravity is fake and we're all held down by wind or some nonsense, but thankfully over here at Most Amazing Top 10, we don't use flat earth science. Now, we do know the effects of gravity. It basically pulls things in, and the more mass something has, the stronger its gravitational pull. Like the moon is smaller than the earth, so if you go up there and jump around, you will feel like you should be playing for the NBA. Gravity even has a massive effect on how the planet acts. The moon's gravitational pull will pull in and out the tides, but why? Why does this happen? Coming in at number 4, we have why do magnets exist? Now, we do know a lot about magnets. I mean, you can give them to a child and they can easily figure out how the opposite forces of a magnet will connect to one another, and the same sides reject each other, like the majority of people I message on dating apps. We know that there are magnetic poles on each side of the planet, and we know that the electromagnetic force is one of the largest forces in the universe. But we are still left scratching our heads when it comes to the terms as to why they are here. Magnetism is one of the great underlying forces of the universe, and unlocking this one could answer a ton of questions about existence itself. Coming in at number 3, we have the placebo effect. the mind is a very powerful thing, and if you ever needed evidence, just look at the countless studies on the placebo effect. One of the craziest studies was one done on arthroscopic knee surgery. This is a common practice in older people with knee problems. A very simple surgery will be performed where 2 incisions are made on each side of the knee, and a doctor goes in and cleans out fluid and cleans up cartilage in the knee. Now, the purpose of this study was to find out what was more effective, the cleaning of the cartilage or the cleaning of the fluid. In order for the study to be successful, there was a control group that was given a mock surgery without their knowledge. Slits were made on the side of the knee, and even a fake surgery was shown on a screen for the patient to watch, but no actual surgery was performed. And the control group recovered just as well, and in some cases better, than the people who had the surgery. So in other words, the mind repaired the body somehow. Now, how this happens, we don't know, but it goes to show how much your thoughts can have influence over your body. Coming in at number 2, we have dark energy. Now, it sounds like we're going to go into a Marvel movie or something. What on earth is dark energy? Well, have you been paying attention to the list so far? We don't know what it is. And when I say we, I mean people much smarter than me. But we speculate that dark energy is what makes up the other 70% of the universe. Now, since the universe is constantly expanding like my gut after I refuse to listen to my own body's signals to stop eating, there needs to be some explanation as to why this is happening. The speculation is that dark energy is the cause of this never-ending growth spurt. Dark energy could be created by quantum particles smashing into each other all over the known universe. This is happening so many times that it would take a good portion of this video just to count all the zeros. But these collisions create energy, which in turn is pushing the universe apart. The question is, how far can the known universe get pushed? Could it get pushed to the point where reality is ripped apart? I don't know, I'm not smart enough to answer this. And coming in for the number 1 spot is quantum entanglement. Now, it sounds like I'm just making this stuff up, but I promise you I am not. This is very real. Quantum entanglement is when 2 particles that are nowhere near each other will start to mirror each other. Now, why is this strange? Well, because it was long thought that only something within a particle's environment could affect it. On top of this, the only way that particles could be doing this is if they were communicating in some way to one another, like they were hooked up on WhatsApp or something. But here's the thing, these particles are so far apart and moving together so perfectly that the speed in which they would have to be sending information breaks the laws of physics. The information would have to move faster than the speed of light, which was thought to be impossible. Now, how is this happening? Once again, we have no idea, but it begs the question, will we one day be able to move faster than the speed of light? I hope so, because that would be cool.
Coming into number 10, we have Where is Cynthia? This is a very bizarre missing persons case that was also featured on US TV show Unsolved Mysteries. Cynthia Anderson was a legal secretary from Ohio in 1980. The 20-year-old loved crime and romance novels, but began having a reoccurring dream that an intruder entered her home. She told her mother about it, but she didn't think too much of it until she started receiving weird phone calls at work. Her employers even went as far as to have an emergency buzzer installed on her desk. On the morning of August 4th, 1981, she wasn't at work, but her car was in the car park. On her desk was a novel that she was reading, but the page was open on a passage that detailed an abduction. A month later, the local police started getting weird calls saying that Cynthia was being held in a basement, but wouldn't give any further detail. To this day, she's never been found, and that case is cold. Coming into number 9, we have Who Shot Tupac? But like, who? Tupac Shakur was one of the most famous rappers in the world when he was killed in Las Vegas in September 1996, nearly 23 years ago to the day. He was just 25 years old when he was in Vegas, having seen Mike Tyson and Frank Bruno fight, which must have been epic. As Tupac and his entourage stopped at a red light in the Flamenco Road and Koval Lane area, he was shot 4 times. He died 6 days later and was not in a state to identify his killer. Earlier that night, it was reported that the rapper had beef with the street. They could have had something to do with it, we'll just never know. A witness came forward, but then they were in New Jersey, thousands of miles away, before they could even submit to further police questioning and identify a suspect. Of course, there are people out there that still believe Tupac is alive and living under a new identity. Perhaps we'll never know. Coming into number 8, we have the Children of Hamelin. So you guys may have heard of the Pied Piper, a little fairy tale with a pretty key moral at the end of it. Pay your bills, if not a bohemian musician will steal your kids. right? Well, it turns out that there is more than just a lesson to this story. There is actually an 800-year-old unsolved mystery. You see, the Pied Piper of Hamelin was actually a real man, a piper dressed in exuberant clothing who turned up in Lower Saxony in the village of Saxon itself in 1284. According to church records, he did steal 130 children from the town who were never seen or heard from again. They were simply spirited away. But were they? We just don't know. Coming into number 7, we have Stonehenge. We're taking it back to my home country of England, but what is going on? What's going on with Stonehenge? I don't know. Stonehenge sits pretty in the Salisbury Plains in England and was laid out around 4,000 years ago at a time where transporting and lifting 50-ton sarsen sandstone and bluestone rocks was legitimately beyond human capability. Aside from the mystery of how it was built, we also don't know what it was used for. The main theory is that it was for some kind of religious worship, although there were far more cosmic suggestions. The structure is aligned with various celestial objects and has been the focus of pagan celebration, especially around the summer solstice. Archaeological digs have also suggested that a breed of giant cows were used either to assist in the construction or, were just chilling there, present, mooing. Cows are just so great. Does anyone ever just stop and think about cows? I love cows, even ancient giant cows. Cows! Moo. Recently discovered underneath the stone structure were 17 further mysterious ancient monuments, which just adds more mystery to the pile of mystery. It's a mystery sundae with a side of mystery, and a mystery cherry on top. Coming in at number 6, we have the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer is one of the most elusive in modern American history. The mystery male at least 5 people, but claims to be behind the deaths of up to 37 people. Despite no arrests, the California Department of Justice has maintained an open case file on the Zodiac since 1969. The Zodiac murdered 3 women and 1 man, with 2 other male victims surviving. The killer claimed to have killed many people in the infamous ciphers which were sent to the police. The Zodiac Killer was given their name as a result of the cryptograms sent to the police, which were a mystery unto themselves. One of those has definitely been solved, but the others not so much. The last known Zodiac in the 1970s, so in theory the killer could be dead, or they could be living out their days among us, which is terrifying. So yeah, despite descriptions of the male killer at the time and many sketches of him, the case is unsolved. Is, or was, at large. This is so mysterious. At number 5, we have the Texarkana Moonlight. Who was the Phantom Slayer? Honestly, we don't know. The Texarkana Moonlight were a series of very grisly that took place in Texas in the spring of 1946. 8 people were attacked over 10 weeks, with 5 of the victims succumbing to their injuries. A pair of survivors claimed that the was wearing a white pillowcase with eye holes cut out over his head. What a ghoul. All of the attacks happened to couples and took place on weekends. The murder sent the town of Texarkana into absolute panic, as I'm sure you can imagine. City inhabitants locked themselves indoors with and it was kind of like scenes from The Purge out there. The Texas Rangers were even called in, and people started arming up and taking to the streets to try and catch the killer, but the assailant never struck again. At the time, the Texas Ranger captain saw that the criminal killer was, and I quote, a shrewd criminal who left no stone unturned to conceal his identity and activities. He was never caught. Coming into number 4, we have the dark deaths of Overton Bridge. I've never heard of a dog taking their own life until now, but it seems that there's a bridge in Dumbarton in beautiful, beautiful Scotland which is A, haunted, and B, has claimed the lives of many dogs. This makes me feel really sad. It seems that since the 1960s, nearly 100 dogs have leapt to their death from the bridge, falling 50 feet into jagged rock below. Why the dogs have jumped? We just don't know. Reportedly, they freak out and they leap. The Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals has sent teams to investigate, but nobody has yet solved the mystery. While the dog deaths are the main issue, it seems that a man inexplicably threw his baby from the bridge in 1994. Now dogs are firmly required to be on leashes. Coming into number 3, we have the Phoenix Lights. What what was going on in the skies of Arizona, Nevada, and Sonora. In 1997, thousands of people saw what they thought were UFOs in the sky between 7:30 and 10 p.m. at night. Thousands of people reported triangular formations of lights passing over the southern states and in North Mexico. A sizable number of people also reported actually seeing a UFO. One witness, who didn't want to be named, which I kind of understand, said, "It was totally silent. I've never seen anything close to the colors from the exhaust that propelled that thing. It was as big as downtown Prescott and completely blocked out the stars." Now, the shared phenomenon actually had a lot of credible witnesses, including the Arizona Governor Fife Symington. While the original event happened 22 years ago, possible reoccurrences have happened in 2007 and 2008. Coming into number 2, we have the case of D.B. Cooper. On November the 24th, 1971, the eve of Thanksgiving, a man using the name Dan Cooper successfully hijacked a Boeing 727 plane in the airspace between Portland and Seattle. The man boarded the plane as a passenger and ordered a bourbon and soda. After takeoff, he handed a note to a flight attendant, but she didn't read it, assuming it was his phone number. Creepy. He then leant over to her and said, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Not what you want to hear. Long story short, he demanded and successfully extorted $200,000 in ransom, over $1 million in today's currency. He then parachuted out of the plane, jettisoned, gone. Nobody knew whether he landed alive or where he was at all. There was an extensive manhunt from the FBI, but the man's real identity has never been solved. Numerous theories were circulated. The serial number on the cash he stole were also released and searched for, but again, no trace was found. As of 2016, the investigation has been suspended and remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Finally, coming into number 1, a mystery of our age, we have the disappearance of flight MH370. Malaysian Airlines 370 disappeared on March the 8th, 2014, flying from Kuala Lumpur Airport to Beijing in China. The aircraft last made contact with air traffic control when it was over the South China Sea, less than an hour after takeoff, before then completely disappearing from their radar. The last words from Captain Shah were, "Good night, Malaysian 370. The plane was still tracked on military radar, which suggested that actually it deviated to cross the Malay Peninsula, until finally disappearing from radar altogether over the Andaman Sea. Oddly, no phone calls of distress or signals were sent out or anything like that. No word. Silence. The black box could have shed light on what happened, but it was never found. Neither was the plane or its wreckage, despite millions of dollars being spent on finding it. So what happened? Alien abduction? ISIS abduction? It simply disappeared into a parallel universe? We just don't know. Do you guys have any answers to these mysteries? And again, don't forget to let me know what the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you is.
Starting off this countdown, we have Cicada 3301. Now, this is one of the most famous internet mysteries of all time. So it all started in 2012 when a mysterious organization, Cicada 3301, posted a weird message on 4chan. According to the message, there was a secret hidden within their posted image, and they were recruiting highly intelligent individuals to try and solve it. They said that solving this would lead them on the road to finding them, and that they looked forward to meeting those that solved it. Well, it turns out that by opening the image file in a text editing app, a string of characters would appear. When decoded, it led users to a website with even more weird messages. Some say that they solved the mystery. Others say that those who completed the puzzle are recruited for something and are never heard from again. What are they recruited for though? That's what I would like to know. In our 9th spot, we have Heaven's Gate. This was a creepy and popular American religious cult on the internet that believed in UFOs. In 1997, police found 39 members of the cult dead inside of a house. Apparently, the members took their lives in order to ascend and board an extraterrestrial spacecraft and go to another planet. They were all found wearing arm patches that read Heaven's Gate Away Team. To this day, the website is still up and running, and no one knows who's running it. Now, in 2015, the administrators behind the website did do an email interview. In the interview, they called themselves
Tela, which stands for the evolutionary level above humans. They claim that the dead members are actually alive and have transcended their human bodies, and that they will come back eventually. To this day, their identity still remains unknown. In our 8th spot, we have Chip Chan. This is one internet mystery that has always left me unsettled. Chip Chan is the name given to a Korean woman that was discovered in a 4chan webcam thread in 2008. It immediately caught the attention of a number of people because the footage revealed this woman sleeping in unusual positions for long periods of time at unusual times of day. In fact, at first, people thought that she was dead. She also sleeps in weird positions like on a chair or on the floor. After doing further investigation, users found that this woman believes that a mind control weapon was implanted into her ankle bone and under her left eyebrow. This chip is said to control her, and that's what's making her sleep all the time. She also claims that she is being held by a corrupt officer named P, and that she installed these webcams into her home so that she can see what happens to her when she's sleeping. This story is just so freaking creepy, and I don't think it's ever been solved. In our 7th spot today, we have Kanye Quest. Yep, not Kanye West, Kanye Quest. Kanye Quest 3030 is an RPG game that was released in 2013. Now, it seems just like a silly game. It centers around Kanye West, who on his way to take out trash travels through a wormhole and into the future. He then has to take down an evil dictator, and you got Tupac, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre in it, and you can have a rap battle with them. Now, the game seems pretty harmless. That was until a player found out the game's dark secret. At one point in the game, you can interact with a displayed message. It seems like gibberish at first, until people realized it said, "Ascend and worship the based god." Further on in the game, you are asked to enter a prompt, and you can type anything you want. But if you type "ascend," the whole game changes and you're put in this secret area. Eventually, players got to a screen that congratulated them on being an open-minded and curious thinker. They then instructed the player to not tell anyone about what they found. It then asks if you wish to participate. If you click yes, then they give you instructions on an exercise that you need to complete. Furthermore, players discovered a QR code that led to a now defunct website. In the end, it was discovered that the game has been tied to the religious cult of Ascensionism and to a mysterious company, Ascension Records. The true meaning of the secret of this game has remained unsolved to this day. Coming in at number 6, we have Jack Froese. Now, there are a number of creepypastas out there about someone dying and then their loved ones receive phone calls or Facebook messages or texts from the dead person. Well, this actually happened in real life. Jack Froese was a 32-year-old man from Dunmore, Pennsylvania. In June of 2011, he died suddenly and unexpectedly from a heart arrhythmia. 5 months after Jack's death, his friend received an email from Jack's account with the subject line, "I'm watching." Soon his family started getting emails from Jack as well. Now, of course, they didn't believe it to be Jack for a second, but whoever it was, they knew intimate details regarding his friends and family, details only Jack would know. To this day, no one knows who sent these emails. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with GhostNet. This is the name given to a large-scale cyber spying operation uncovered in 2009. In fact, it has been described as one of the most extensive operations ever uncovered. Yet, no one knows who was behind this operation. So in 2009, it was found that an organization infiltrated over 1,000 computers across 103 countries. They did this by sending emails with attachments or links to individuals or organizations. By opening the file, the user would unknowingly download a virus onto their computer that allowed the hackers to gain complete control of their computers, so they could read and send data and even turn on someone's webcam and microphone. Like I said, no one knows who was behind this, but since the network originated in China, some believe that the Chinese government had something to do with this. Others believe that the CIA or the Russian government were behind this. In our 4th spot, we have the most mysterious song on the internet. This is the title given to a song with an unknown name, sung by an unknown artist with an unknown origin. It all started when a man named Darius came across an old cassette and liked a song on there and wanted to find the name of it. Him and his sister couldn't figure it out, so they turned to the internet for help. Soon, thousands of music enthusiasts came forward to try and figure out this song. To this day, no one has figured out who's behind this song, hence why it's given the name the most mysterious song on the internet. What's even weirder is when the song was shared online, a number of people recognized it. They said that they have heard it before, they just can't put their finger on it. In our third spot, we have Markovian Parallax Denigrate. This mystery started back in the 90s and revolves around a number of weird and confusing posts that appeared to be complete gibberish. Back then, there was something called Usenet, which was like a forum. On August 5th of 1996, hundreds of weird messages started appearing on Usenet. No one knew what they meant, but people knew that they were related because each post had one thing in common. The subject line read Markovian Parallax Denigrate. Turns out that these are secret codes, but no one has been able to crack them yet. In our second spot, we have Ted the Caver. Now, some say this is merely just a creepypasta, whereas others believe it's a true story. I'll let you decide what you want to think. Back in February of 2000, a man known only by the name of Ted the Caver posted about exploring an unknown virgin cave passage in the US. According to Ted and his journal entries, when him and his friend entered the cave, they found a narrow passageway with a small hole. So they drilled the hole and decided to explore it further. But as they went to explore this cave, weird things began to happen. Him and his friend heard ghastly screaming, they found weird hieroglyphs on the cave walls, and apparently encountered evil spirits in the cave that followed them home. All of this was backed up with images of him and his friend exploring the cave. The last post was on May 19th, 2001, when Ted revisited the cave and said he would update everyone when he returned home. He never updated the post, making people believe that he never returned home. In fact, this mystery was so popular that a horror movie was made off of it. And in our number one spot today, we have the Lake City Quiet Pills. Now, this is another very weird and wild one. So it starts with the death of a Reddit user, Religion of Peace. He was a moderator for the subreddit Jailbait, which is disturbing on its own. But he mainly posted about his military experience and guns, and would encourage posts to get people to upload pictures on his website, LakeCityQuietPills.com. But as many investigated his site, they realized that hidden inside the site's HTML code was a motto. It said, and I quote, "Dispensing Lake City Quiet Pills to lousy bastards in need of permanent rest since 1968. It continued on saying, "Shade is maintaining the calendar and access to the file dump. Angel has the job postings for EU and Asia. We aren't sending anyone to me. No one. Don't ask for listings." Then what followed were what appeared to be job listings. Here are some. Immediate need, 8 to 10 Chinese Korean, fluent, Korean dialect accent, details after contact. 12-week, half pay. And they went on to say that they needed Arabic French people. No papers, no problems. A lot of people then theorized that this site was used as a way to pass assassination jobs back and forth. As people dug further, they found a government-owned bullet factory in Missouri called Lake City Ammunition Plant. Meaning, the quiet pills that they're referring to are bullets. I mean, yeah, you get shot by one of those and you'll be quiet. So maybe this website was a front for some illegal activity.
Starting us off at number 10 is the Battery Man. Slavisa Pajkic, aka Biba Struja, aka Electric Biba, is a man who since the age of 17 has apparently had electricity coursing through his body at all times. He can literally fry a hot dog with his bare hands. He claims he's an insulator, accumulator, conductor, and heater all in one. Using 2 metal pins, he can even make a light bulb light up, even though if any normal person touched 220 volts, they would die. Not him though, it's not even a thing for him. Just makes it look so easy. He even makes an electric circuit with him and a bunch of his students holding hands, and he helps people with their sinus and back problems, their migraines. And if that didn't manage to convince you, he became a Guinness World Record holder back in 1981 when he touched a few thousand volts. He also heated water to 97 degrees Celsius in the record time of 1 minute and 37 seconds. And no one knows how he has this power, how the electricity entered him and never left, how he controls it, or how he hasn't died from it yet. We just have no idea. But I would love to be like a walking appliance. It would save me so much money and electricity.
In at number 9, the Paulding Light. A small light that appears in a valley outside of Paulding, Michigan. This has been a mystery that has been puzzling investigators since the 1960s.
It almost looks like a flame, man. How it flickers? Yeah, it looks like a flame out there.
Look, it's red on it.
It's coming real close.
Yep, you see it? It's going red now.
Some believe it's a ghost, while others claim it could be some sort of geological activity or even some natural gases. The light appears in the same spot almost every night, and of course there are tons of myths and legends surrounding the light. Some claim it's the light of a railroad brakeman who was killed while trying to stop an oncoming train from colliding with a car stuck on the tracks. Others claim it's a grandparent looking for a lost grandchild, using a lantern that needs constant relighting, which is why the light seems to come and go. In 2010, the Paulding Light was featured on the show Fact or Faked, Paranormal Files, who couldn't come up with a reasonable explanation for the random light.
At number 8, we have the disappearance of Frederick Valentich. On the 21st of October 1978, Australian pilot Frederick Valentich was doing a 125 nautical mile training flight. Now, the 20-year-old had no idea that that would be the last flight of his career. Known as a flying saucer enthusiast, Frederick radioed Melbourne air traffic control saying this.
Is there any known traffic below 5,000 feet?
No known traffic.
Seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000 feet.
Now, if you didn't understand what he said and it's unclear, he's asking if there's any known traffic below 5,000 feet. They respond saying no known traffic. He then claimed there was an unidentified aircraft that was following him at 4,500 feet, which clearly wasn't a plane. It was illuminated by 4 bright landing lights and seemed to be moving at quite a fast speed. He then reported that it seemed to be approaching him from the east and that maybe the pilot was pranking him. The craft started orbiting above him, and that's when Frederick started experiencing engine problems. Now have a listen to the last few things he said in his transmission before contact was lost.
It's not an aircraft, it's hovering, and it's not an aircraft.
Search parties were sent out and covered 1,000 square miles around the perimeter, yet he was never found. The last thing he says is it's not an airplane, and then contact just gets lost. Like, where did you go? Were you abducted by aliens?
At lucky number 7, Dale Kerstetter. This mystery is exactly that because no one knows the answers to anything, really. September 12th, 1987, Kerstetter started his weekend shift as a security guard at the Corning Glassworks plant in Bradford, Pennsylvania. When another security guard arrived the next morning to relieve Kerstetter of his shift, Dale was nowhere to be found. $250,000 of platinum pipe was also missing. However, Kerstetter's truck was still in the parking lot, and after the police were called to investigate, they were stumped. The keys to the truck were still in the ignition. Kerstetter, a heavy smoker, left behind a full carton of cigarettes. The only thing missing was his .22 caliber pistol. What's even more interesting is Dale's lunchbox was full, and upon reviewing security footage, about 10 minutes into Kerstetter's shift, a masked man is seen approaching the back of the plant. Kerstetter is seen walking up to him and then looked directly at the camera. The two men were never seen again. To this day, some believe Kerstetter was part of a heist, while others think he was coerced into the crime. He was looking at the camera as a signal of asking for help. Kerstetter had 6 kids and 2 grandchildren at the time of his disappearance. No one has seen or heard from him since that night, and many are still wondering what really happened to Dale Kerstetter.
Now at number 6 is the sand geysers. So everyone knows about water geysers. They're out here going to Iceland and chilling in those hot geyser baths and whatnot. Nothing new, I wish I could do that. But back in 2008, in the eastern city of Al Asa in Saudi Arabia, a sand geyser just appeared out of nowhere. The sand was coming out and reached 9 meters in vertical length, but no one was able to explain how the phenomenon was happening. Several Almaco geological teams went to the site to get to the bottom of it, but they simply couldn't. Some claim it could have been because of an earthquake tremor, since some sand volcanoes form during large earthquakes, but 11 years later they're still clueless about the real origins of the sand geyser.
Halfway through our list at number 5, the Cowboy Bandit. This one is insane because this guy somehow has been eluding the police for over 30 years. It started back in 1987 on September 19th, when a man entered a bank in Spokane, Washington and robbed them of $100,000. The man who robbed the bank was described as wearing glasses, a cowboy hat, and cowboy boots. When he pulled the gun on the teller asking to be taken to the vault, he also revealed a police scanner, making it clear he'll know if anyone calls for the police. After completing his first robbery, the Cowboy Bandit would go on to rob about a dozen banks total, even being captured on camera at some of them. Although it took a while to get the bandit on camera, while he was robbing a bank, one of the tellers set off a bill trap which is located under some of the bills the tellers were handing over to the bandit during a robbery. This not only notified the police but also activated the bank's cameras. Still, even though he was caught on camera, to this day, law enforcement have not been able to find the cowboy bandit.
At number 4 is the max headroom interruption. Now, I feel like many people have seen this signal interruption that happened back in November of 1987 already, but we're going to show it again. The signal intrusion happened at about 9 PM during the sportscast news on WGN-TV and lasted about 28 seconds. The second intrusion happened during Doctor Who and that lasted about 90 seconds. It's been 30 years now and the hijackers behind the interruption are still unknown, and honestly the whole thing was just really creepy. The person in the video is wearing a max headroom mask and sunglasses with this buzzing sound in the background. In the first intrusion he's just swaying from side to side, bobbing his head up and down in front of this metallic striped background. In the second one, the person actually talks, saying he's a freaking nerd. Heeing away, he starts humming and singing a song and seems like he's on some kind of high level of drugs. He goes on to say, "I just made a giant masterpiece for all the greatest world newspaper nerds," and I mean, he's not wrong. 30 years later, we're still talking about it, trying to figure out who it was.
In at number 3, Leah Rowland. At around 10:30 AM on March 20th, 1997, Leah Rowland was working as the manager of a gas station in Nebraska. The mother of 2 had just gotten promoted the day before and didn't think twice when a red Pontiac Grand Am pulled in to get some gas. The man in the red car walked into the gas station without shoes on and sweatpants rolled up to his knees. He waited for a mother and her daughter to leave the store and then approached the counter. Leah was instructed to hand over the money in the cash register, which she did, a total of $150. She was then told to lay on the ground. Complying with everything the robbers said, Leah wasn't expecting him times, twice in the arm and once in the head, instantly. The suspect then took off with the money, some soda, a pack of cigarettes, a lighter, and the gas he filled his car up with. Although there was surveillance footage of the entire crime, to this day, Leah's killer has never been found.
Now at number 2 is the Hampton Court Palace ghost. Now this grand estate was the home of Henry VIII and all his 6 wives and all their kids. And I feel like I learned about this guy in history at primary school more than I learned about anyone. It was a tie between him and both world wars, so I mean that's saying something. So the staff at the palace had the alarm go off, which meant the fire doors were open, but when they rushed to check there was nothing there. But in the footage you can see the doors opening even though no one's physically opening them, and then a man appears out of nowhere in medieval clothing and leaves through the doors.
You don't see the doors actually being pushed open by hand. Figure strides forward and slams them shut. As you can see, and close-ups have shown that it appears to be dressed in medieval clothes, similar to what Henry VIII would have worn.
Now, no one saw any person come in and out of the building, yet the footage shows otherwise, and it looks like a skinnier version of Henry VIII, to be honest. Like maybe the afterlife made him skinnier. A good diet plan, though.
Taking the top spot on our list at number 1, Bigfoot. Now you most likely already know the story here, but for those that don't, well, it's quite an interesting one. Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson filmed what some say is a real-life Bigfoot, and others claim to be a hoax way back in 1967. The story goes the 2 men were searching for Bigfoot. Patterson claimed to have seen large footsteps earlier in the week and convinced Gimlin to go on a journey with him. When the 2 returned to the area where Patterson had originally found the prints, they were washed away due to rain. Still, the 2 men trekked deep into the woods on horseback. Then out of nowhere, Patterson's horse started jumping around, and then they saw it. Bigfoot on the other side of a creek. Patterson reached for his camera and started to record, but as he got closer, he tripped on some sticks. The noise got the attention of Bigfoot, who made eye contact with the men and then kept walking deeper into the woods. To this day, there's still a debate about whether or not the footage is real, and Gimlin doesn't seem to care to make people believe him. He knows what he saw on that day.
Starting off this countdown, we have the USS Cyclops. On February 16th, 1918, the US Cyclops set out to Baltimore, Maryland from Rio. It was estimated to arrive on March 13th, but it never made it there. The ship and all the 306 members on board disappeared without a trace. The ship was never found, nor were any of the bodies. Now there's a lot of things here that don't make sense. For example, how could the biggest ship in the US Navy disappear without a trace? Number 2, if they were in trouble, why didn't they send an SOS signal? And why were there no pieces of wreckage found? As described by the Santa Fe magazine, they said, and and I quote, "Usually a wooden bucket or a cork life preserver identified as belonging to a lost ship is picked up after a wreck, but not so with the Cyclops. There was just nothing left behind." It was a very weird and eerie case. Moving on, at number 9, we have the Flannan Isle Lighthouse Keepers. On December 7th, 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers took their spot in Flannan Isle to do a 2-week shift. However, when the boat returned to collect them after their shift, they were nowhere to be found. They disappeared under very weird circumstances. For example, when they got to the lighthouse, it was locked. Inside, the clock had randomly stopped working. All their gear was left inside, and there was a meal on the table ready to be eaten. However, their bodies were never found. One other eerie thing would be the lighthouse keeper's journal entries. In one entry, he wrote about how one keeper was acting weird and all quiet. The other keeper was apparently crying for some reason. Now, some believe that the men were outside trying to secure something and then they got blown over the cliff, or a wave maybe washed them out to sea. Maybe they ran out in a panic and that's why they left their gear inside. Whereas others believe the men were killed and tossed out to sea, or even kidnapped by aliens. But whatever truly happened to them is still unknown. In our 8th spot, we have the Isdal woman. In 1970, a mysterious woman was found burned to death in Ice Valley, Norway. We don't know who she is, and it seems like someone didn't want us to find out. Why? Well, all the labels were cut off of her clothes, and distinctive marks were scraped off of her belongings. It gets weirder when police found that she had a number of fake passports and disguises like wigs. She also had notebook entries that were all in code, so it may be that she was some sort of foreign spy. But to this day, police haven't cracked this case. There have been some breakthroughs over the years, but nothing solid to help us identify this woman. We don't know what happened to her, what she was doing, and who her killer is. In our 7th spot, we have the Watcher. In 2014, a family bought a $1.3 million home in New Jersey. Little did they know that the home came with a lot of baggage, including a creepy stalker who called themselves the Watcher. Before even moving in, they began to receive letters from the Watcher. These letters talked about what the family was doing, proving to them that someone was truly watching them and stalking their every move. Some things that this Watcher said in the letters were, and I quote, "This home has been the subject of my family for decades. I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming." And then another letter referred to the new owner's children and asked, have they found out what's in the walls yet? Which made the family terrified, thinking that there was some listening device or, security cameras hidden in the walls. The family ended up hiring investigators and set up cameras, but the Watcher was never caught. As a result, they decided to move out of their home and sell it for a loss. But what about the new buyers? Like, do you have to put in house comes with creepy stalker in the house listing or what? I'm thinking that this was just some ploy for a guy to get $1 million home for cheap. Like he torments everyone who lives there so no one wants to buy the house, and then someone sells it for cheap and he gets it for a steal. Did I just solve this case? I think I did. Coming in at number 6, we have Septic Tank Sam. Septic Tank Sam is the name given to an unidentified man found in a septic tank in Alberta, Canada. So the year was 1977, and a couple went out to an abandoned farmhouse to find a pump for their septic tank. However, when they opened the tank, they found a decomposed body of a man. According to police, it was a very gruesome and sadistic crime scene. The man had been tied, tortured, burned, and shot before being dumped in the tank. The remains were in such bad condition that the examiner took months to figure out if the body belonged to a man or a woman. Eventually, it was discovered to be of a man. His teeth records were then sent to over 800 dentists, but there were no matches whatsoever. It's a very sad case, and I hope one day we can figure out who this man is and who his killer was. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the man from Torrid. This case is fairly creepy and might prove that time travel or multiple dimensions are real. So in July of 1954, a well-dressed man arrived at the Haneda airport in Tokyo, Japan. Nothing was odd about this man until he was questioned by the customs officer. The man then claimed that he was from Torrid, and it was his 3rd time visiting Japan from his country. However, there was no country named Torrid. His documents, like his passport and IDs, were all authentic, but it said that he was from this mysterious place called Torrid. They eventually took him into custody for further interrogation, thinking that he was lying and he's some criminal. He was then placed in a hotel room that had only one entry and one exit point. That was monitored by 2 guards. But somehow, this man mysteriously vanished. The thing was, he was put up in a room high up in a hotel with no balcony. There's no way he could have escaped. Now, some people think that Torrid is a real country, but just in a different universe, and that this man somehow passed through a parallel dimension and ended up at the airport, the wrong airport, whereas others believe that he is a time traveler who mistakenly landed at the airport. In our 4th spot, we have the UFOologist. Who here believes in aliens? If you do, hit that like button. Well, Max Spears certainly did. Max Spears was a ufologist as well as a conspiracy theorist. In July of 2016, he went to Poland to attend a conference to speak about secret military programs. On July 16th, he was at a friend's place when he passed out on her couch and stopped breathing. Here's the scary part. Just days before his death, Max told his mom, and I quote, "If anything happens to me, investigate." He also told her that he felt like he was going to get murdered. But the police officer that investigated the scene said he died of natural causes, and no examination or further investigation was conducted. Apparently, he overdosed on anti-anxiety drugs. But many people believe that there's more to this story than just that, especially since he dies only a couple of days after he said he was going to get murdered. Also, he was closing in on details about UFOs. Did someone kill him over this? It's all pretty freaky, am I right? Coming in at number 3, we have the double identity. So once upon a time, there was a man named Lawrence, or Larry Batter. He was a cookware salesman from Ohio. But on March 15th, 1957, he went out for a fishing trip and never returned home. It was deemed that he got lost at sea. He was declared dead in 1960. Here's the thing though, after Larry's disappearance, a man named John Fritz appeared in Nebraska. He became a radio station announcer and soon a local TV personality. John Fritz looked exactly like Larry Batter. In 1965, someone from Ohio recognized John as Larry, but John had no idea who Larry was and no memory of his life. Psychiatrists even examined him and deemed that he was not lying. But after running tests, his fingerprints were the same as Larry's. So John was Larry. I know, it's confusing. So here's a couple of theories. A, he faked his own death and started a new life in Nebraska. Number 2, he suffered from dissociative amnesia and genuinely forgot who he was. Sadly, he passed away in 1966 and his case was never solved. Or maybe Larry had a twin brother. Ever think of that? Come on, guys. In our 2nd spot, we have the Oakville rain blobs. In August of 1994, something weird fell from the skies in Oakville, Washington. At first, people thought it was just rain, but no, it was definitely not water. It was like these strange, clear blobs. One person reported that it was very mushy, almost like jello. This mysterious substance rained down 6 times over a 3-week period. And guess what? Anyone exposed to that substance became very ill. One resident had difficulty breathing, blurred vision, intense nausea, and vertigo. Another resident said that everyone in town contracted a flu-like illness that lasted 2 to 3 months. And sadly, several cats and dogs exposed to the substance became ill and passed away. Upon inspecting the substance, it apparently contained human white blood cells. But to this day, no one knows what it is or what caused it. And in our number 1 spot, we have the toxic lady. This next story is going to shock you. It's probably the craziest one on this list. So on February 19th, 1994, at 8:15 at night, a woman named Gloria Ramirez was wheeled into the emergency room in a hospital in the Southern California city of Riverside. She was only 31 years old, but her blood pressure was very low. She could barely breathe and her heart was beating very fast. Medical staff started helping her right away. Things got weird. For starters, her body was covered in a weird oily sheen and her breath had a fruity garlicky scent to it. The blood then took some of her blood and realized weird particles floating in her blood. The weirdest part, after taking her blood, they noticed a weird smell emitting from the blood and her body. After getting a whiff of her blood, hospital staff became very ill and started dropping. In the end, 23 of the 37 emergency room staff became sick from Gloria. 5 had to be hospitalized for the rest of the night. 1 was severely ill and spent 2 weeks in the ICU. Hence why they gave her the name the Toxic Lady. Sadly, they weren't able to save Gloria's life. Now, what was wrong with Gloria and how come she made so many people sick with her blood? Well, there are a couple of theories out there. One is that Glory used something called DMSO to help her cervical cancer. DMSO is toxic, but back in the day it was marketed as a cure-all, like it will cure your pain, anxiety, you name it. Now, when the MDSO is exposed to oxygen, it converts to dimethyl sulfate. As a gas, dimethyl sulfate vapors destroy cells in people's eyes, lungs, and mouth. When it gets in the body, it can cause convulsions, delirium, you name it. Although Gloria's family denies that she used DMSO, this is one explanation to why others got sick when exposed to her.
Something else that's been unsolved is the mystery disappearance of Amelia Earhart. She disappeared into the number 9 spot. Amelia was an American aviation pioneer and an author. She was the first female aviator to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Amelia has had several early aviation records, including reaching the highest altitude by a woman at 14,000 feet, which took place in 1922. Amelia's last flight was during her attempt to make a circumnavigational flight of the globe in 1937, which means she wanted to fly around the whole world. And this is when she vanished in the Central Pacific Ocean. There was a search by the Navy and Coast Guards that cost $4 million, which is the most intensive search in US history. Alright, DB Cooper comes in at number. This was the name used by a mysterious person, and this is when the individual person purchased an airline ticket. And the name he actually used was Dan Cooper, but the media got it wrong and there was a spelling typo and it was DB Cooper. So ever since then, this guy's new name has been DB Cooper. DB Cooper hijacked the Boeing 727 aircraft that he was on, and this is when they were in between Portland, Oregon and Seattle, Washington on November 24th in 1971. He extorted $200,000 in a ransom, which is equivalent to $1.1 million nowadays. DB Cooper then jumped out of the plane with the parachute, and that's the last time we ever know what happened to him. There was an intensive manhunt and enduring FBI investigation. Here's a picture of what he could have looked like. This case remains the only unsolved air piracy in American aviation history. Moving on to number 7, we have the Broadbent Killers. This is a group of 3 people who killed and carried out armed robberies of restaurants, stores, supermarkets, and weapon depots. The 3 unknown identified men were known as the Giant, the Killer, and the Old Man. So there's a total of 28 victims, and 23 of them were carried out by the killer. Investigators have no idea their motives because normal criminals try to steal as much as possible with minimum risk. These guys, they just killed whoever they wanted to, whenever. So the crimes took place between 1982 and 1985. So these men are believed to be alive today. So sometime this year, all of their crimes are going to be expired, and no judicial measures against the gang will be possible, so they're totally exonerated. Coming in at number 6, we have the Bermuda Triangle. It's also known as the Devil's Triangle. It's an invisible triangle stretching from the tip of Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. There has been a number of aircraft ships that have disappeared under the mysterious circumstances. According to the US Navy, the triangle does not even exist. Popular culture believes it does, and they believe the disappearances are due to the paranormal activities or activities by extraterrestrial beings. The first aircraft went missing in 1945 with Flight 19. There was 14 people on board that flight. There was another 5 major aircraft incidents to go along with 9 major occurrences at sea starting in the 1800s. In at number 5, we have the Sleeping Hollow, which is also called the Sleeping Sickness. Residents of a small village in northern Kazakhstan are falling asleep in the middle of the day due to a mystery illness. Residents would just pass out in random places and sleep for days on end. Doctors and scientists have traveled to the village in an attempt to solve the mystery. They have taken soil and air samples, but they just can't seem to find anything wrong. There is no viral or bacterial infections either. The first case was in 2013, and as time goes on, it seems to become worse. The next unsolved mystery is who I'm calling the time-traveling woman, and this comes in at number 4. Check out this picture right here. In the background, you can kind of see the woman from the Charlie Chaplin film on a phone, a cell phone, a wireless phone in 1928. This is way before the invention. She was just a random woman who walked by on set while producers was filming. 10 years later, in 1939, there was another woman talking on a wireless device. You're looking at the picture right now. Could it be the same person? Could she have time traveled? Conspiracy theorists hailed at the picture as proof of time travel. The invention of the cell phone wasn't even until until 1973, which has a lot of people baffled. The 1938 time travel was actually found. She was a 17-year-old girl, and she said she received the wireless telephone from a factory who was experimenting with wireless telephones, and they gave it out to 6 random women to test it out for a week. But still to this day, that factory, these cell phones were never found. So maybe Martin Cooper wasn't the inventor of the cell phone. This is probably one of the most popular mysteries on this list, and it's the Loch Ness Monster in at number. Another name for this would be the lake monster, and belief in the creature's existence, and has been first cited in 1933. Evidence of the Loch Ness monster has not been proven, but there has been many sightings and pictures of it. Here's the first picture ever taken, and this was back in 1934. Since then, it's become one of the most iconic pictures ever. It was taken by Robert Kenneth Wilson, a London gynecologist. Most people believe the picture is a hoax and a way for attention. But what do you guys think? Is the Loch Ness monster somewhere out there? We're almost at the number 1 spot, but coming in at number 2, we're talking about the Black Knight satellite. Is this like Batman satellite or something? The satellite mystery originated in 1954. Pictures of it was taken, but no one has any idea how it got there. The US Navy and NASA investigated it, but they just can't figure it out. This satellite is the only one that goes into polar orbit, which means it doesn't rotate with the Earth. It rotates vertically from pole to pole. Maybe this is like an alien spying on us, or Nikola Tesla spying. What gets more mysterious than this? And we finally made it to number 1. I'm talking about the Overton Bridge, aka the Dog Bridge. It's located in Milton, which is in Scotland. Every dog that walks over this bridge, it jumps off. Whenever the dog fails, it would just reclimb it and jump off the bridge again. There's been 50 dogs in the past 50 years that's leaped to their deaths. This raises the question of, can dogs actually deliberately? The bridge has been attracting these dogs since the early 60s, or at least that's as far back as we reported on them. This is one of the most mysterious things in the world, and this is why it's in at number 1. And I'm not even sure if we're ever gonna get this answer, unless we can like communicate to dogs, see what they're thinking when they're near this bridge. Now wouldn't that be something of the future?
Starting us off at number 10 is Julia Johnson. Back in April of 1925, at around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, 5-year-old Julia Johnson was seen by the blacksmith across the street, playing alone outside her house in Winnipeg. At 3:50 p.m, Julia's neighbor Pauline Krall had a conversation with her, and that was the last time anyone saw or spoke to Julia. 5 minutes after the conversation, Pauline's son came home and told his mum that Julia's mum was looking for her, and within 20 minutes a search party was sent out looking for the child. Julia was a shy girl that wouldn't venture far from home for no reason. The adults had no clue how she could have disappeared within that 5-minute window. Extensive searches were underway, but Julia was never found. 9 years later, when a building near the family home was being repurposed, a machinist was dismantling a boiler in the basement. Inside the boiler, he found the mummified body of Julia Johnson. There was no evidence left, none to the point the coroner had no idea whether it was a murder or just an accident. Police then tried to think of who would have had access to the building at that time, and building manager John Goodwin claimed he left the key at the blacksmith's shop, but both blacksmiths denied this. Someone was lying, we just don't know who it was. Was it John Goodwin or was it the blacksmiths? Coming in at number 9 is the Highway of Tears. This entire mystery revolves around 725 kilometers of Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert, British Columbia. From 1970 till now, there have been a string of at this location, and its name was coined in 1998. The RCMP Project EPANA claimed there are less than 18 victims, but Indigenous organizations don't believe that. Because such a high number of victims were First Nations women, they claim the victim numbers go as high as 40 and that these women were just abducted off the highway. Reasons behind the murders are endless. Some point to poverty and drug abuse, others say they're due to systemic racism, and others claim hitchhikers are targeted because their location is so remote and isolated. Of all the cases, only one has ever been solved. Cody Ledger-Bokov killed 3 women and a teenage girl in the Highway of Tears area and was later convicted. But that's the culprit of 4 of those murders? What about the other 36 that still go unsolved? At number 8, we have Christine Jessup. And this one may go down in history as one of Canada's most infamous cold cases. Back in October of 1984, 9-year-old Christine Jessup got dropped by the school bus outside her home in Queensville, Ontario. Christine was alone since her parents were at work at the time, but she somehow disappeared. Her body was found 2 months later in a wooded area more than 50 kilometers away from her home. Autopsy results showed she had been raped before being stabbed to death, and in a rush to arrest someone for the horrendous crime, suspicion fell on the Jessup's next-door neighbor, Guy Paul Morin, who was quickly arrested and convicted of Christine's murder. I hate cases like that when you're so in a rush to arrest somebody that you just arrest the first person you think of, which is usually always false. Guy literally had a solid alibi. He was at work and his timestamp even proved it. It was impossible he had kidnapped her, but he was still arrested. It took 11 years for him to be exonerated after an inquiry report said the evidence in the case had been tailored to suit the police's theory of Guy killing her. The police even bullied a witness about her timeline. They even left cigarette butts by the house since Guy was a smoker. All that while, the real killer was still at large. He was reinvestigated and found guilty in 1992, but was finally freed in 1995 when the DNA test proved he wasn't a match. Imagine being in jail for that bloody long, wrongfully. And so many people are. So many people are. Filling at number 7 slot are the babes in the woods. That term is frequently used to describe a case with multiple child victims discovered in the forest, which is exactly what this case is. Back in 1953, the bodies of 2 young boys were found in Stanley Park, Vancouver. The corpses were so badly decomposed that on initial observation, the medical examiner thought one of the victims was a girl. Further examination led the team to conclude that the victims had been dead for 6 years already. It took till 1998 for DNA testing to prove that both victims were in fact boys and brothers, but till this day they've remained unidentified. All officers knew about the case was that they were both killed with a hatchet. One was 10 and the other was 7, and both seemed to be Caucasian. Police started looking for mothers who were missing their children, and they were tipped off about a redhead with 2 kids who had been taken by loggers a few years prior. The case stayed cold till 2018 when detectives decided to use DNA sites like 23andMe and Ancestry to try and identify the boys. Currently though, there is still no identification. Now at number 6 is Dino Bravo. Adolfo Bresciano was an Italian immigrant living in Quebec. His day job was being the professional wrestler Dino Bravo, and I don't know how much you guys know about wrestling because I honestly don't know a lot, but Dino was named Canada's strongest man by the World Wrestling Federation in the 80s, so I mean, huge flex. He ended up retiring in 1992, and less than a year later, in March of 93, his body was found shot to death. Dino was found sitting at home filled with 17 bullets, and no one could figure out who was behind the seemingly random murder. Rumors started floating that the mafia killed Dino for his involvement in a cigarette smuggling ring. Dino was related to Vic Catroni, who was a mobster, and he used his fame to secure connections in the underworld. As he progressed, he became responsible for bigger projects, one of which was a shipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The shipment was apprehended by police, which led to people thinking his death was mob retaliation. Even one of Dino's previous opponents, Bret Hart, said Dino told them he knew his days were numbered. So maybe he was just a hit in the mob's many hits? Who knows? Coming in at number 5 is Carrie Ann Brown. This case is the most infamous case coming out of the province of Manitoba, so let's explore it. 15-year-old Carrie was at a party with her best friend Nicole on the 16th of October 1986. The two were waiting outside the house about to leave when Nicole went inside to grab something she had forgotten. By the time she came back outside, Carrie had disappeared. All Nicole could see was a single set of footprints walking in the snow. The situation freaked her out even more so since Carrie was meant to sleep at her house that night, so what was she going to tell Carrie's parents? Her father reported her missing at 4 p.m. the next day, and less than 40 hours after she was last seen, her dead body was found in a wooded area outside her hometown, Thompson. Autopsy results showed that Carrie had been raped before being killed, and DNA tests concluded that 2 people were involved. A local man was charged with the crime but was let go a few months later due to lack of evidence. Until this day, the case remains unsolved. At number 4 is Kimberly Ann McAndrew. Back in August of 19 1989, 19-year-old Kimberly McAndrew, a student at Dalhousie University, left her shift at Canadian Tire a few minutes early. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. She had plans that night to go to the Halifax Busker Festival with her family and boyfriend, but obviously she never showed up. A witness reported seeing her buying flowers at Penhorn Moor in Dartmouth, but Tom Martin, the police detective on the case, highly doubted that. See, if you don't know the layout of Halifax, Halifax is here and Dartmouth is like here, and you can either take McDonald Bridge to get there or a ferry. They're not super close and it's a bit of a mission to get to Dartmouth, and the only reason I know this is because my ex went to Dalhousie and I visited him a lot. Either way, anyone, including Kim, would have never made the trip to Dartmouth considering she had plans that evening, so Martin suspected that whatever happened to her happened in the Canadian Tire parking lot, and I do agree with Martin. To this day, neither her or her body have ever been found. I just don't understand why you'd go to Dartmouth to buy flowers and you can buy flowers in Halifax. Filling number 3 slot is Lynn Harper. Back in July of 1957, 12-year-old Lynn Harper and her family had relocated to Clinton, Ontario since her dad had recently joined the military. In June of 1959, Lynn went missing near RCAF station and her body was found 2 days later at a farm nearby. Police officers automatically turned to Lynn's 14-year-old school friend Stephen Truscott since he was the last person who saw Lynn alive. That evening, Stephen gave her a ride on his bike from school towards County Road. No one has any idea what took place on that bike ride, but officers assumed that when the two reached Lawson's Bush, Stephen raped and then killed her. According to Stephen, though, he had left her at the intersection of County Road and Highway 8, and the next time he looked back, he saw her getting into some random Chevrolet. Despite his account, he was charged and tried as an adult, first being sentenced to death and then just to life in prison. He was paroled 10 years later and was acquitted of all charges in 2007 after a major miscarriage of justice. Lynn's real abductor and killer remains unknown, but imagine how stupid you have to be to focus all your attention on a 14-year-old boy when there are other viable suspects in Clinton. Now, at number 2 are the Hemlock Valley murders. Back in 1995, the bodies of 3 women were found near the Agassiz Mountains in Vancouver. The victims, Tammy Pipe, Victoria Yanker, and Tracy Olajide, were all prostitutes in their 30s working in downtown Vancouver. So already we know the killer had a preference in who they liked to target. Prostitutes in their 30s. All 3 were assaulted and then murdered before being left near the mountains, and thankfully with this case, officers kind of already knew who the culprit was: Ronald Richard McCauley. Ronald had a history of assaulting prostitutes and had already served 17 years for 2 rapes and attempted murders. He was imprisoned again shortly after the bodies were found, but there was no way to link him to the crimes. The semen samples from the crime scene were too degraded, but thankfully as forensic technology improved, they were able to test his sample in 2001. It wasn't a match. So after relying on the killer being in jail all those years, the police got a huge wake-up call when they realized the case was still ongoing. I hate cases involving prostitutes because prostitute cases are the ones that police least look into, because I don't know why, maybe they're just a lower demographic of the population, but they are still as important as any part of the population. Look into those cases. And finally, at number 1 is Louis Sam. Back in 1884, an American mob crossed over the border from Nooksack, USA to Abbotsford, Canada, and lynched 14-year-old Sam. The boy was accused of murdering a shopkeeper in Nooksack called James Bell, and when he returned to Abbotsford, his people, the present-day Sumas First Nation people, turned him over to BC authorities because they figured they would know how to deal with the matter. While Sam was awaiting his trial, the angry mob captured him and hanged him from a tree near the border. After investigation, it became extremely clear that Sam did not kill James Bell and that the 2 men who riled up the mob in the first place were the most likely culprits. 2 BC officers went to Nooksack in disguise to collect information, and they found out that the murderer was most likely William Osterman. William had taken over Bell's business and was the one who brought over Sam, promising him a job, which was a complete lie. His sidekick and brother-in-law David Harkness, who was also sleeping with Bell's wife, was the ringleader of the mob. The 2 went unconvicted, and a young person of color died for no reason other than the fact he was a person of color.